printing it off and bringing you guys up copies.
Are we going to be able to review the whole thing before?
Well, it's,
Just discussion today, right?
well, no, they wanted us to act on it, so
Well, they better be getting it to us a little sooner.
we can talk.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Tell me when you're ready.
Yes, section.
Good morning. It is Tuesday, April 11th. We're here for our regular commissioner meeting. We have all three commissioners in-house with our administrator, Mr. Gonzalez, and our,
Careful.
what's your title? Consultant, Mr. Davidson. So at this time, I'll call the meeting to order, and please rise and join me in the pledge. All right, the first item on the agenda here is 4 sets of minutes to be approved, February 28th, March 7th, March 14th, and March 21st. Was there any additions, revisions, or corrections? Seeing none, we'll approve those. Move down to the vouchers.
I don't have my book because we don't pay for this, and so I don't have the script. We have one voucher before us today. Move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $1,724,072.65 is presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by 2 representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Just one voucher today?
Only
so-
one voucher, yes.
So we'll move down to the consent agenda. I believe there's 2 items on the consent agenda today.
Move for approval of consent agenda items 1 and 2 as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for consent agenda items 1 and 2 with no discussion requested. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next, we'll move down to public comment. Is there anybody for public comment? Anybody on the phone?
Commissioner, we do have a phone caller.
Okay. We'll go to the phone first.
Go ahead, caller, you have 3 minutes.
Good morning. I guess there was some talk, I guess kind of, everyone knows about the talk about seceding. I guess Oregon wants to split in half, and whether or not Washington should. I think Diddy or somebody was talking about it, but I just think it's, maybe that's a good idea. We have different views of different communities over here. We used to once have a great community over here, and I think we could have that again. I think I've learned some things, and if we elected like Cole St. Peters as our governor, and I think he'd elect somebody to the state police and straighten things up around here. Somebody like Turner. Maybe Turner would straighten things up, because as we clearly know and see here, even when the weather, a quick weather check to weather.org sees the night that the veteran Jones was slaughtered here by the Franklin County Sheriff's Office. You can see the weather. I can see it was foggy that night. I can see the weather conditions were bad. There was even freezing weather in certain areas. So, I mean, what are we talking about? We're always manipulating. We're always changing what our public sees because that's our intent. Beyond reproach, the phrase of reproach such as not to have criticism or to be made perfect. His integrity is beyond reproach. In Franklin County, your officials, your civil officers, have taken that term to be, don't approach me. Stay away from me, be quiet, keep your mouth shut, and you don't have the rights here. Approach, to come near or nearer, something or someone in time or distance, a verb one might say, beware your lies, your misdeeds, or if you do not remain above reproach, the time may approach where your chickens shall come home to roost. You know, in the state of Washington, I think the law states something about ethics and being beyond the appearance of improprieties. Brad was talking about that last time. He was staying from voting, and I think that's appropriate. But what kind of lowdown scumbag, degenerate, is so dumb and ignorant they don't realize how quick a weather search? You know, we go back there again. Like, just go out and check the weather. But your attorney's going to tell you it's justified, but they're going to smear over basic facts. Even the investigators that night that were there on the scene said, yeah, it's foggy out here. But you're supposed to believe what you're told. There's in Oregon, there was an officer who had the same kind of tactics that the officer here had. And instead of covering up for it, his commander said, the commander of the SWAT team at the time filed a report concluding
Thank you.
that Smith's decision making the overreaction having potential to lead to someone being seriously injured or killed in a real-world operation was later brought up in a lawsuit where $1.6 million was rewarded to that
Okay.
family in Oregon because, well, the officer had these tombstone tactics.
Thank
had
you.
this mentality to just run on in with your gun in.
Your-
You know,
your time is
wouldn't have
up.
to take
Thank
the
you
keys from
very much for
in
the
a
call.
felony situation. You should have just let him call him out. Wait for backup. Direct him.
Thank you.
Now.
Is there anybody else for public comment?
Good morning. This is, I'll start with the thank you for lending time with Michael and looking into civil service so that the county can be fully addressed and developed. I'm asking for a point of clarification. And last week, it was announced that he is our new Chief Examiner Secretary. According to the RCWs, the Chief Examiner shall be appointed as a result of a competitive examination. The Chief Examiner shall also serve as Secretary of the Commission and such assistance as may be necessary. And the Commission has supervisory responsibility over the Examiner. The Chief Examiner shall keep records, and I don't want to read the whole thing, but basically, the Chief Examiner, the Civil Service Commission has to vote on that. And so we're kind of going through a series of, with the Chief Examiner position, we made emails requesting time to review. So we've just gotten that as a Civil Service Commission this afternoon for the position, the requirements that were being advertised. Apparently, the advertisement's already gone out. We do have an interested party. We are going to try to catch up with what the county commissioners want to do. I'm bringing this to your attention so that you can correct your records as if needed. It is not demeaning. It is just simply a matter of sticking with the RCWs that we have. And the commission will try to catch up. I will try to call a special meeting. I could not bring this to the agenda because I did try to double check with our legal counsel, and they were gone because of the holiday. And when I did get to catch up, it was perplexing to them. So I'm safeguarding Franklin County in general and trying to stick to the rules that I have before me as a chairman and adhere to those. I still want Michael to come and continue his work, but I want to bring that to your purview because it was announced last week, and maybe it was a clarification of that language. But I do need your help on that. Thank you.
Thanks.
You want to?
You know, I will say, I don't want to get too in-depth, but Michelle, we had a great conversation. We came in and talked about the commission and some of the issues that they're having, and certainly we've had some challenges filling that examiner role. So really the intent for me to step in was really a stopgap measure until we found somebody, and Margot Wilder was great in identifying a public works employee that I don't want to identify her publicly at this point, that is very interested in the position. So she's going to come to today's meeting, and the Civil Service Commission will have an opportunity to interview her, as the intent of the RCW. So definitely we definitely want to give Michelle the opportunity and the other two gentlemen that are on the board to interview her and be comfortable. So, I definitely want to adhere to that process. So, and that's something that Michelle and I talked about. I don't want to force anybody onto the commission, but it seems to be a pretty legitimate person. So please speak to that.
I really do appreciate how quickly you're trying to answer this, but I would ask to slow down so that we can respond. As a Civil Service Commission, and the RCW I'm citing is 41.14.050. And immediately after we organize, we elect our chief examiner / secretary. So I just want to be sure that we're, as a county, doing everything as well as we can during this massive transition with new personnel and everything. It's difficult to hold the continuity that I'm concerned about. So again, thank you for your time. That's the RCW for you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anybody else for public comment?
George Dockstetter, Self Landing Road. I noticed while I was gone, you passed a new subdivision ordinance, and the only thing I have as a problem of it being presented to the board and passed is that none of the stakeholders in our county were involved or asked to be involved in drawing up the ordinance. None of the realtors, home builders, or any of the developers that we have in the county were notified of it. I assume it was done in good faith, and with some of the people I know on the Planning Commission, I'm sure it was done right. But I think in the future, when you get ready to draft new ordinances coming out of the departments, I think the stakeholders should be asked to give their opinion or their feelings on what should be involved and what should be included or not included in an ordinance. And I want to thank you for hearing me out, and I want to congratulate Mike on his new job. And as far as babbling bobblehead that was on the phone, I've never had a problem with any of the county departments by going and talking to them. I might not like the answer, but at least they'll let me talk to them and say my piece instead of hiding behind a phone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I would like to say that I agree with what George said there about reaching out to stakeholders. The only reason I heard about that was that one of the planning commissioners reached out to me personally and told me that it was going on. I had no idea. And I'm sure there's other people that are very involved in the county, but I pay pretty close attention. And unless that person had reached out to me, I would not have known. The planning commissioners asked me a question: how do we reach out better? And I'll describe it to you how I described it to them. There is no auction that Booker Auction or Muster Brothers Auction has anywhere within reach of this county that you don't know about it at least 14 times before it happens. We need to put similar effort into reaching out to our stakeholders to let them know about the business of the county. Thank you.
Anybody else on the phone?
No.
Anybody else for public comment? Seeing none, we'll move down to regular business items, appointing non-elected members to the Benton County Board of Health, presented by Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Commissioner. As you mentioned, this agenda item concerns the health board requirement for non-elected members. I'm certain you guys are familiar with that, but for our audience, I wanted to give some context. So this new requirement was mandated by the Washington State Legislature in 2021. The goal and the intent is to have a more diverse membership as a way to promote equity in health policies. The new board members must include at least one person with a medical background, 3 others who will bring a perspective to the board from people using or otherwise depending on health district services. The third qualification, those selected must be from categories that the district described as people with a public health or healthcare mindset. So certainly the intent is diversity. In the past, it was a 6-member board made up of county commissioners. So that's sort of the context and how I wanted to tee it up for the commission.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, just an observation here. While I was in Olympia participating in the Legislative Steering Committee on behalf of the 39 counties, there was a Benton Franklin Board of Health meeting, and at that meeting, my fellow commissioners voted to reduce the Board of Health from 6 commissioners, 3 from each county, down to 4, 2 from each county. And while I would have appreciated the opportunity to participate in that discussion and perhaps make a case for why I might be the one to stay on that board, in my absence, my fellow commissioners voted to place themselves on the Board of Health, and that was, I think, a bit of an oversight, but that's history at this point. We'll move forward. And on this item, I'll be abstaining from voting as no longer a member of the Board of Health. I realize fully that this is a vote of the Board of Commissioners making this appointment. But since you two have appointed yourselves as the members of the Board of Health for Franklin County, I think I will just abstain and allow you to select the non-elected members of that health board. Thank you.
I'll just add that this is nothing new. The discussion of putting in only 2 commissioners has been going on since the first of the year. And that had we put the 3 commissioners on, then we would have to pick one more person from the community. And we thought that the board would be too big, having an extra 3 members. So that's why we chose to go with the 2 commissioners and from each county, picking the 4 people to go on the board. So if we went with 3 commissioners from each county, we would have had to add 2 more people onto that board. And at that size, the board would be of such a size, it would be hard to get a quorum. So but it's nothing new. I mean, it's been discussed since the first of the year. Thank you.
So following up on that, if I might, it is absolutely accurate that we've been having this discussion for many months while House Bill 1152 was working its way through. And we did have discussion about reducing to 2 commissioners from each county, all accurate. Had we kept 3 from each county, it would have added 2 additional citizens to our Board of Health, which I hardly think would have been a bad thing. That would have increased the opportunity for non-elected citizens to participate in their Board of Health. But that aside, my real point was that when it came time to winnow the board from 3 down to 2, it would have been appreciated to at least have done that business when all 3 commissioners were there to participate and advocate for their own possible remaining on that board. But like I say, the action was not unlawful, and 2 commissioners can in fact vote to do that, and you did, and that was merely my explanation for why I would be abstaining from voting, nothing more. But you're correct, we discussed it for a long time. The piece that I was expressing some concern over was that we didn't make that decision as 3 members of the Board of Health. 2 members of the Board of Health made that decision in my absence while I was serving in Olympia. Thank you for the opportunity to comment, and if we could, I'd be happy to move on to voting now.
Mr. Gonzalez, you have something to add?
Commissioners, one thing I did want to add is it's our understanding that on April 19th, Benton County Commissioners will be voting on whether to have 2 or 3 commissioners. Is that what you were trying to tell me, Karen?
So I spoke with Janae Parent, who is the secretary for Benton Franklin Health District. And there was a discrepancy whether they were going to have 2 or 3 commissioners from each county. On the meeting for Benton Franklin Health District on the 19th, they will discuss that and move that further. At that time, they will either keep the 3 commissioners from each county or go to 2. If it goes to 2, then we will bring forth for a vote here the 2 commissioners that will represent.
Okay, and yeah, absolutely. And what I'll do, commissioners, is I'll call over there and make sure we clarify and get the facts and make sure that is in fact what's happening. I certainly believe you, Karen, but I'll definitely confirm and relay that information to the commission.
The old Ronald Reagan, trust but verify.
Absolutely. I'm
Yes.
an old journalist, so I'll definitely check.
Okay.
I would just go as far as to say too, that if Mr. Peck would like my position on the health board, I'm fine with that. So, I mean, there was no misintent as far as going forward with that, so.
Well, today, we're just voting on appointing the non-elected members, which are just 3 members, because we can't find a tribal member to serve, so we're only at 3 right now, and that's all we're voting on today, and that's Resolution 2023-110. So can we just move forward with what's on the agenda?
Move for approval of Resolution 2023-110 as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2023-110. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Chair, I will abstain.
Okay, 1 abstention. All right, next we'll move down to Benton Franklin Behavioral Health Advisory Committee presentation, presented by the Chair, B.J. Olson. Sir.
All right, I think there is a PowerPoint for this. Didn't receive it. It was sent by the Matt Rasmussen. I do have a copy of it if you wanted to. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you can just put it in the computer right there.
Where's our?
What's that, Mr. Davidson?
It's not turned.
IS guy, where's he at?
All right. Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank the commissioners for your leadership in this very important area in our community. The need for crisis services in the Benton Franklin counties is a subject that has been addressed at least for the last 2 decades. And I remember when I first moved to the community in 1999, that there was discussions about this very thing that we're talking about today. And I've sat on many committees and commissions since then discussing this very same idea. A lot of talk over the last 20 years, but I feel like we're finally at a place where we can actually make some movement on these. So thank you for your leadership in this, and look forward to seeing what will come about as a result of this committee. So I wanted to give an update on the the committee. Let's see. The first thing I want to is kind of do a rough outline of the committee and establishment of the committee. The first meeting we had was on July 29th. We adopted bylaws at that meeting and set a schedule for meetings. In the second meeting, we elected officers. I was elected as a chair for the committee. Vice chair was Jason Bliss, and the secretary was Aaron Petty. In the third meeting, we established some working subgroups. The subgroups were substance abuse, mental health, workforce development, communications, and finance and facilities. And for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to kind of follow that as an outline for the work that the committee has done. So far, we have had 2 requests for proposals. The first one had a deadline of December 9th. In that request for proposals, there was only 1 proposal received, and the committee determined not to open the proposal and to issue a second request for proposal. And one of the things that was different between the 2 proposals was the first proposal was like a total package deal in terms of the organization running it, and the second one gave the option to address specific pieces of the continuum of care that is needed. And in the second proposal, request for proposal was due March 9th. We had 2 that were received, and the committee determined to interview 2 of the submissions. Now, just a point of clarification, we determined to interview the initial request for proposal, and then also the one of the 2 that were submitted in the second. We found that the other one that was in the second one was not adequate. It was more of a letter of intent than an actual full RFP. So,
Could I
yes.
ask a question? Was on the second, was it a repeat of the first? The proposal that came in on the first one in December, was that one of the proposals that came in on the March 7th?
There was some confusion about whether they had to resubmit, so we reached out to them, the first one, and they said they were still interested, so we did.
So they did put in for the deadline on March 7th too, or no?
No, they did
Oh,
not.
so there's 3 actually.
3 of them, yes,
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
And so we also have talked about reaching out to other providers that could potentially offer parts of that system of care as well, and not necessarily doing that through the RFP process. So actually, just yesterday, we interviewed 2 of them. We haven't met as a committee. We'll do that on Thursday to kind of talk about how that interview went. The one area that we identified as sort of low-hanging fruit that potentially could be implemented quickly is mobile crisis teams. And mobile crisis teams would be working with the designated crisis responders and basically to address the need in terms of those who are need treatment but would likely end up stuck in an emergency room or going to jail without some sort of crisis intervention. And so that we believed would be a very quick and easy, well, I don't know, easy is the right word, but we could do it certainly more quickly than the larger items that will require a lot of build-up. So we did reach out to law enforcement and EMS, and they indicated that embedded crisis teams was not desirable. They preferred that if we do go forward with that they be their own entity rather than being embedded with law enforcement. The Crisis Response Center is, of course, the biggest thing that is on our radar screen. We've talked about the importance of having a phased implementation and in the various pieces of that. The concern over limitations with regard to the KGH building, which was purchased by Benton County. There's a 72-hour hold limitation, which would make that location unable to receive people that needed longer-term care. We also discussed the underutilization of Lourdes Counseling Center. there's a need for medical staff, not just mental health and substance use at the Crisis Response Center. We also, and this is probably the biggest conversation that has come up, is having a common entry into services being an important part of the system of care. We've used the phrase "no wrong door," and so that certainly is, we're in agreement in that being a need for our community. A lot of times when people are in crisis, they get shuffled around to various providers and organizations as they walk through crisis. And when you're in crisis, you don't really need to be shuffled around. You need a place that you can go. So we agree that that's an important part of this system of care. And then also identified the importance of having a step down on the other side when somebody's been through crisis, having somewhere to go to. That's part of the continuum of care. In fact, crisis services would be reduced if there was a place for people in crisis to step down to. And so we're talking about other locations that may possibly happen. This is sort of the most optimistic. In order to complete a crisis response center, it would take at least a year from conception to completion. Probably more accurately, it'd be more closer to 18 months to 24 months to complete something like that. The subgroup of mental health treatment needs, I'm not going to go through this entire thing for the sake of time, but I wanted to include that on the slides so that you could have a record of that. But I will hit on the first few of them. Field responder program, which is we already talked about. The need for respite or diversion beds. Having a place to go is important when somebody is in a mental health crisis, and a lot of times homelessness or jail ends up being the options that they take. So having respite or diversion beds is valuable. And then we also identified access to a prescriber on an urgent basis. When we look at the availability of psychiatric prescribers in our community, you're looking at anywhere from 6 to 18 months to get into somebody who's trained and qualified in psychiatric medicine. So when you're in crisis, waiting 6 months is not something that is beneficial, and often decompensation occurs. So that, in terms of the continuum of care, that's one issue that needs to be addressed with mental health needs. The substance abuse group, I got 2 slides for them, so again, I won't go through all of those. But some of the top tier ones that they identified was inpatient substance use disorder treatment, medically monitored withdrawal management, and then a 23-hour observation unit. This is something that's being looked at the in Olympia by legislatures, and we're going to have more information kind of rolling out in terms of what that means, what that looks like, what the law will actually hold to. But something along those lines, whether it's officially recognized as a 23-hour observation unit or something that is more along sobering services. So that is a definite need for our community. And there's the second page for that. And the workforce development is a critical issue for our community, particularly the shortage of mental health providers system-wide. And that's just an issue both locally and regionally. I mentioned that for psychiatric prescribers, it's 6 to 18 months. You can almost mirror that with any mental health provider. Might be a little bit better. You might be able to get in to see somebody within 60 days. But the reality is even 2 weeks when you're in crisis is really unacceptable. And so there is a shortage of mental health providers in our community that needs to be addressed. We also identified bilingual staffing as a shortage for our community that needs to be addressed as well. When we think about doing a crisis response center or a crisis residential center, the staffing needs for that is going to be extremely high. And so if we take the qualified providers that are in the community to staff a crisis response center, we will be robbing Peter to pay Paul, essentially, because we need those providers in the community to provide ongoing services. And so recruitment and also being able to get new people that are interested in the field. And that kind of leads to the last item there is we want to reach out to educational institution so that we can develop a plan for workforce development for our community. The other area was identified as public communications. There is a need for public education around what we are doing as a committee, but also what is needed for our communities. And one of the things that we want to address is what are the appropriate channels of communication for this work group in terms of we don't want to get beyond what the commissioners want to communicate to the community. And so we want to be lining up with appropriate communications in that way. And also, and this may be a future request, not necessarily for this morning, but is there a budget for those communications that we could have in terms of public education? The last area that we had a work group was finance and facilities. Several discussions are related to that. The KGH building is not ideal for the CRC due to the purchase agreement. And so it kind of eliminates that for the CRC, although it could be used for other areas of the continuum of care. There's a Bruno Avenue building that needs a lot of work, frankly, aesthetically. And there's also some level of stigma of being located in the warehouse district. Some frustrations that the committee was not involved in the selection of those locations was discussed in these meetings as well. Benton County has purchased these buildings and said these would be the places that we would like to have the crisis services housed. And so even though there's frustrations about the lack of involvement of the committee did affirm moving forward with these two facilities as being part of the network for crisis services. And then the Bruno Avenue building would be most likely the point of entry into these services. And with that, I'm open to questions.
Questions, commissioners?
Well, I appreciate the fact that you said it's, a year out and more than likely 18 to 24 months. But the question is, what are we doing in the meantime for everyone in crisis?
Sure. One of the things that we will be discussing in upcoming meetings is what parts of the continuum of care can we identify that could be stood up quicker than that. Mobile crisis teams would be an example of that, and then making those recommendations to the commissioners.
Yeah.
Appreciate the update, the information. I don't really have any questions. I've been following this pretty closely, as I know my fellow commissioners have as well. I would point out for anyone who's watching this video later or listening now that the the limitation on the KGH building was imparted by the previous owners, the sellers of the building. I won't go so far as to think that I can read their minds and know what their motives were, but I do think that there's a general assumption that that condition can't be revisited. And I think maybe we ought to rethink that position. And at some point, maybe it's not now, but at some point, revisit that with the seller, which was LifePoint. I don't know that that's necessarily something that can't change in the future. I agree with your observations about the potential stigma of a building in the warehouse district, we'll call it for now. But both options are substantially better than what we have now. So I also agree with you that moving forward with what we have is appropriate, but we ought not give up on getting that limitation lifted, in my view. Other than that, no questions. Just appreciate the update.
Couple questions. One of the first slides you had up there was about law enforcement and EMS. Usually their first contact with people in need of help. There will be a exchange of information
Yes.
from them to these designated crisis responders, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, they would work together, definitely.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping we were working towards, because more often than not, they go to the jail, and then the crisis responders could go to the jail and pick them up, correct? Okay. The other thing is I've already met with CBC about getting this back into their program there, and they're very receptive to it. I'd encourage you to reach out to them too. Mr. Hughes is the dean over there of nursing, and we are coordinating a meeting with WSU. But besides people to help in these crisis centers, we need educators. And that's why we're going to meet with WSU, is that we need people there to educate also, so that we can have more people. Spokane Falls, they're satisfying their area's needs. Yakima is satisfying their area needs, but we don't have anybody, like you have stated. We are falling way short on personnel to fulfill this facility's needs. So we need to work locally with CBC and WSU branch campus and hopefully satisfy our needs here.
Absolutely. And our workforce development work group would be more than willing to participate in any of those conversations.
Well, if we schedule another meeting, I'll reach out to you and hopefully get you at the table with them.
That'd be great.
Yeah, we work together. So, thank you. Is there any other? Mr. Gonzalez, Mr. Davidson? Any other
No,
comments?
thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, that moves us down to item C, Memorandum of Understanding between Benton and Franklin counties for the allocation of juvenile justice center operations. And we received this just prior to the meeting. Sent to us by Benton County. And who is the presenter on this?
We really don't have one allocated, but I could go ahead and give some background and present it. So basically, we did have in the read-aheads a mock version of this, which is now the final version of the Memorandum of Understanding. This has been quite a process as we've been working through the very first proposal that we got from Benton County. We identified that we had equity interest in the building. I think we worked on getting an estimate of what that would be with the help of the Benton County Treasurer and our Franklin County Auditor, who both happen to be appraisers on the side, but this wasn't an official appraisal. This was just a estimate. They worked on getting us an amount for that so that we could do a quick claim deed over to Benton County, if you so choose to. We also didn't have any options. Well, basically there was an option out for both parties beginning at year one. We negotiated for a little bit more of a lock-in, but allowing us at a certain point in time, if Franklin County wants to possibly do their own juvenile center, which I think that they may in years future as the county continues to grow, we do have the option of opting out now, and they have obliged us with a couple options there in this final version. And so that we've had several meetings. Commissioner Peck went with me to a meeting with their county administrator and one of their commissioners, and Commissioner Peck asked for a term sheet for the MOU, and they provided that to us also, which you have in front of you, and we've had for a while, that kind of summarizes on one sheet the provisions of, kind of breaks this down as a cheat sheet, if you will, for the MOU. They're with the spring here, they're anxious to do the much-needed remodel of the juvenile center. Most of you have, I think all three of you have taken a tour of the facility and know the bad repair that's in, and they're really wanting to move ahead, and so they're hoping for us to make a decision on this. This is obviously a big commitment. We do have Mr. Wheeler here that could answer any questions. And perhaps because of the fact, I might just ask or suggest that because this is all kind of relatively new and there may be, and that this is kind of a negotiation type of a situation that we have between our two counties, that we can have discussion here, but maybe we ought to schedule some of this discussion for later in the meeting with Mr. Wheeler and our prosecuting attorney in a executive session.
Well, I'm reading through the term sheet for the MOU, and there's no mention of what interest we're getting out of the quitclaim deed. There's no mention of what's that worth to Franklin County. Number 9, it says neither party will have the right to terminate the new MOU for convenience in the first 10 years, but later on it says Benton County is open to changing the 10-year provision if Franklin County would prefer a different time period. And I thought we were going to go every 2 years with their budget. That's not in here. And number 13, after opening the new facility, Benton County will solely be responsible for adopting the budget for the facility's upkeep and maintenance costs, which has historically been adopted by both counties. So we're on the hook for whatever they want to do for a third of the cost without any input.
This term sheet, Commissioner, was, I think unfortunately is a little bit dated. This term sheet was done before some of these other provisions that might be in here. So that's the type of things that I think would be beneficial to go over with our attorney.
Yeah, because we just got this handed to us. I thought this was the new term sheet.
No, I apologize. They actually compiled this term sheet for us some time ago.
Okay.
It was helped to just to do clarifications, but then we continued to bargain these other items with them.
Okay. I just going through it, and
It's good questions, and I think that they all need to be answered, of course, before we execute a contract, and it might behoove us to do this during executive session.
in executive session. Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would offer some perspective on that. The agreement waives the monthly fees for Franklin County for a period of time, and that was part, if not all, of the consideration for Franklin County executing a quitclaim deed, transferring the property to Benton County. But frankly, we have much bigger issues with this than this term sheet. I don't really think that this piece of it is appropriate for executive session. I think it should be open session, so I'm going to go ahead and speak to that. RCW 393320 speaks to public hearings requirements when you're transferring property between public entities, municipal corporations like we have between the two counties. We're required to do a public hearing on that transfer. And so for us to execute this MOA or MOU, which involves that transfer to Benton County without having first held that public hearing, 1, violates law, 2, violates public trust, because it presupposes that even if we pass this today and it gave us a 30-day window, it still presupposes by our passage that the public hearing would also concur with our decision. It's frankly disrespectful to the citizens for us to approve it without first having done that hearing, in addition to the fact that it's unlawful. The full value requirement is also an issue, and it's laid out in the 1997 AG opinion from the state of Washington requiring us to get full value from the property that's being transferred. Now, it was, I think, before your time on the board, but at one point, property at the Hapo Center, formerly the Track Center, was sold, and our auditor insisted that we could not sell that public asset without first getting an appraisal, not an opinion of value from someone who is an appraiser, but an actual appraisal. That question also has not been addressed. So as you've heard me speak for years about the importance of completed staff work and coordination, this is a perfect example where being asked to approve a contract without having first met the legal requirements for a public hearing. And even if we were to approve it, we're presupposing the outcome of that public hearing, which is improper. So for those reasons and several more that I won't take your time with right now, this needs to be slated for a public hearing, and by this I mean the transfer of land between two municipal entities, Franklin and Benton County. Once that public hearing has been held, then I think we can move forward with approving an MOU. And at the time, once the hearing is done, the actual transfer and the MOU could be done together in one resolution. But to do one ahead of the other presupposes the other regardless of how you go about it. So we need a public hearing to comply with 393320. And once we've done that, we can sign an MOU. Thanks.
Mr. Davidson.
Commissioner, those the concerns that Commissioner Peck has raised, I hope that both of you also read those. Those were compiled in a opinion we got from Jeff Briggs with the prosecutor's office. At the time when we were meeting with Benton County, we were all in agreement, Benton County and Franklin County, that the methodology of estimating the value that we had was agreed upon by both. And this public hearing concern has only been brought to us in just the last, that I'm aware of, in just the last couple of days by the prosecutor's office. So,
Actually, Mr. Davidson, it was the subject of prior discussion and an email from the prosecutor's office last Thursday, just to put a fine point on it. But when we're talking about public hearings, it's not just the compliance with the statute, it's the message that we send to our citizens of taking an action where the law gives them the right to hear and weigh in on the decision before we act. So that's why I think it's an important and notable concern. Yeah, thanks.
well, again, I'd just like to say yes. Okay, Thursday instead of a couple of days. It was a few days then ago that we received it. Since the last board meeting, I guess I should say, that we got that from the prosecutor's office. And before then, the methodology that we were going about to try to determine the value was mutually agreed upon by both counties. That's all I'm trying to say. So,
Yes, and we received this from Jeff Briggs on April 6th. And he does mention RCW 3933.020. He also mentioned some other RCWs down lower, further in that email. So with that,
well, he does, while we're talking about it, and we're going to do this in open public meeting, I guess we continue the list. Our deputy prosecutor also mentioned, if you see bullet number 1, if I don't have it in front of me, but if I recall, bullet number 1 has to do with whether this is financially feasible. And I don't want to delay this for another decision-making point and then forget something else that we should be addressing. So is that something, to me, I don't think that we're in financial, the county's not in financial condition to do anything else right at this point, but to take Benton County up on their offer for further partnership, at least in the short term. If there's any question about whether this is financially the right thing to do, and there needs to be a financial analysis done, I would suggest that we start with that right now so we don't keep delaying this.
So I would note that the email that you're now detailing as to who it was from and further opinions is starting to wade into executive session stuff, because you're starting it into some, well, you're getting into some legal advice. I cited the RCW because that's public information, but since you've already brought it up, the reference was that that was not a matter for legal evaluation. It was making clear that those decisions and evaluations belong to the board, and I don't think that that's been a question till now. But if the board wants to take that up as well, it's fine. My point was simply that We've had lots of discussions on this. As a board, we've decided that this is the way that we would generally go. We got the latest version of this, 2 minutes before the meeting started, so we've not had the benefit of time to read it. We've had some input from legal counsel that says that this path is unlawful, so I don't really know what else it takes for us to say, stop, time out, put this on the table for completed staff work so that when we take it up again, all these questions have been answered. I did bring up something new today with respect to the question about whether or not a formal appraisal is required, and I brought that up because it was our own county auditor that in a previous land transaction insisted vehemently that we had to have a formal appraisal. Now, in that case, it was a settlement of pending litigation, and in that one instance, an appraisal is not required. But we need to be consistent in how we do things, and I think the anticipated executive session with our legal counsel later in this meeting will likely help clarify some of these points, but this is not ready for us to consider or approve today.
So table this until after the executive session? Okay.
I don't think we can even do it after the executive session unless we somehow figure out how the required public hearing is somehow now not required. The law is pretty clear.
That's what the executive session is going to clarify for us, so.
Okay.
We'll move down to Commissioner Administrator updates. Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Commissioner. Obviously, the first 6-7 days have been extremely busy. As Michelle mentioned, have an opportunity to meet with the Civil Service Commission and hopefully bring some stabilization to that. So Michelle and I, as I mentioned earlier, had a great conversation, ended with a hug, and and I think we're gonna, I really like Michelle, and I think I can help move that forward and then ultimately step out of the way. So looking really forward to that. Had a chance to meet with all my directors and really figure out some of the needs and initiatives that they want to accomplish. So certainly have a great staff here at the county, so excited to work with each of them. Met with our elected officials and excited we're going to have a barbecue. We're working on that. So hopefully, again, that creates unity and staff morale. Another thing I'm trying to get involved that I brought over from the city of Pasco, I was highly involved in the Cinco de Mayo festival. So I'm working to get the sheriff and the posse involved with the parade and doing some crowd control and having a booth there. So definitely one of my goals is to have the county a little bit more visible in the public eye and really make us present and get us out there. So really excited about that. Working with IS to create some social media platforms. So that should be exciting, so we can certainly get our message out there. And, a lot of times the media likes to paint the county and this board in a certain manner. And I think there's a lot of positive things going on in the county, and definitely want to be able to get that out to the public. Took a tour of our facilities, and we certainly have a lot of different ones in different kinds of shapes. So, one thing I'd like to do early on in my process is really put out an RFP at some point and do a long-term study of our facilities, and because we're growing so quickly, but our staff hasn't necessarily cut pace in terms of numbers with the growth and what's happening in the city of Pasco and the county. So it's been busy. I want to say Dwayne's been great. The staff has been great, and thank you to each of the commissioners. I had a short opportunity to meet with each of you, and really looking forward to continuing my development. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Davison, do you have anything you want to report on?
No, just to inform the board, I've went to halftime status, so I work the mornings now to try to reduce cost of the county, and because meetings have just been going so well with our new county administrator, I'm really feel so positive about the new administration that's coming in here. I think he's going to be doing just an absolute fabulous job, and I just have nothing but good feelings about this, and so I'm really delighted about what's transpiring. Didn't have any external meetings at all this week, unless I guess you could count the interviews for our Board of Equalization is taking place, and that's all I got to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Peck.
Had a good meeting with our new county administrator last week. Covered a lot of ground, longer than either one of us expected it to be, but I think it was productive. Had the Wasatch weekly legislative update and continued to work with the Benton Franklin Council of Governments on a surplus piece of property on A Street that we're working to sell legally, and update of our bylaws and our policies at the COG.
Commissioner Mullen.
At the Washington Highway Users Federation legislative briefing last week, actually it's every week. Also had the Greater Columbia Behavioral Health Committee meeting, long-term aging and care meeting, and also attended the electeds meetings. And just wanted to make a comment on the barbecue, which I think is a great idea, but just wanted to let everyone know that's not using county money.
Right.
And therefore, it's something that would be paid for, by the employees or volunteers. Yes.
No public money because we voted to rustle a cow from the Mullen Ranch to
That must have been the meeting I was not at.
a vote was taken. I'm sorry, Commissioner.
But anyways, I think it's a great idea. Like I said, I just wanted to make sure, clarify that no public funds were being used for that. And Mike's been doing a great job. Had the opportunity to meet with him, and I can already tell you that his schedule of events that he's bringing forward to us and letting us know his goals is it's great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, my last week was also a meeting with Mr. Gonzalez, and his leadership skills are shining bright, so I just keep up the good work and let's move this county forward. Had veterans meeting, but we weren't able to make any decisions because of the lack of a quorum. Civil Services met with one of the civil service representatives, ex-patrol, very nice gentleman. Had a great conversation with him. And then the Columbia River Policy Advisory Group and what's going on there, and they keep proclaiming winter's over, but I keep seeing more snow on the hills, but they claim that our water supply is dwindling up there. So it's amazing. We keep getting all the participation, but we're not precipitation, but we're not getting any more accumulation. Sort of baffles you a little bit. But other than that, that was my week last week, and now we'll go to the elected and department heads. Is there any elected or department heads that would like to come forward and speak about any issue?
Morning, Commissioners, if I may. Thought I'd bring something to your attention that is currently impacting juvenile justice across the state of Washington. The Supreme Court enacted a juvenile court rule during the pandemic, 7.16, that essentially restricted the issuance of warrants on juvenile court matters unless the court could make a finding of serious threat to the community. The Superior Court Judges Association in the state of Washington, along with the Washington administrators of the court, WAJCA, have come together and written a letter to the Supreme Court asking them to rescind this rule that they enacted during the pandemic. Right now, it's open for public comment. That public comment closes the end of April. As of last week, there had only been 5 comments entered on the Supreme Court website to express interest in rescinding that rule. But the opportunity right now is present for those who may not be in agreement with that to go ahead, or in agreement to voice their concern either for or against this rule that essentially restricts Superior Court judges from exercising their authority to issue a bench warrant when somebody fails to come to court, or if somebody violates a technical violation of the probation, to only those where they can make that finding of serious threat to the community. So it's far more restrictive than at least what I believe the law currently allows under the RCW for the courts. And it's something that we had a presentation, the Superior Court Judges Association and the Juvenile Court Administrators Association presented at an en banc conference last October. And there's a letter that you can review on the website, and I can send you the Washington Court website where you can find, send you a link where you can see that, a letter authored by the Superior Court Judges Association stating the reasons to rescind. I thought they did an excellent job of stating reasons to rescind this order, if not rescind, to at least consider modifying. And so that opportunity is present now. And I don't know if during this session there's opportunity to answer questions, but if I can, I'd certainly try to answer any questions you may have on
Yeah,
that.
we can interact on this. That's why we put it on the agenda, so we can interact. Is there any questions?
Just ask that you send us a link so make it easy for us to not only participate if we choose, but also to share it with others.
Okay, I will send that link when I get back to Mr. Gonzalez and Mr. Davidson this morning.
Perfect. Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
And thank you for your time and consideration on the juvenile justice MOU and rebuild. So I appreciate that too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other elected or department heads that would like to come forward? All right, seeing none, we'll move down to administration office business. Discussion on the creation of the National Center for Public Lands. Mr. Gonzalez, correct?
Thank you, Commissioner, and this is something that Commissioner Peck and I viewed during a WASAC meeting. I think it was a couple Tuesdays ago. My days are kind of blending together, but yes, this is a proposal for a National Center for Public Lands and Counties, and certainly want Commissioner Peck to weigh in, so I'll just tee it up just a little bit. In October of 2022, the National Association of Counties in the Western Interstate Region Board of Directors proposed the creation of the Center for Public Lands to look towards the future of unique and important lands. The center, in order to meet its mission, they need $15 million collectively. Washington counties collectively, now this is collectively, our portion would be $635,000, and Franklin County would have a small portion of that. So if Commissioner Peck wants to pick it up from there, I certainly want him to weigh in on this, because I think we share that this is a positive thing for the county. It's essentially a lobbying organization that would look for money on county's behalf.
So just to add on to that, this would be a national nonprofit, nonpartisan body that would be able to represent county interests nationwide before the U.S. Congress, House and Senate both, and would seek to do a number of things, not the least of which is ensure that federal agencies that encumber county-owned lands get compensated for the loss of tax revenue that would normally accrue if it were in private hands. It gets into timber and a whole host of other issues that we could speak about all day, but I think the important things are that each county is getting a share of some one-time grant money. And while I was trying to read it off slides presented in a Zoom meeting, I think I misread a decimal point or something. I previously said that I thought that we were getting 153,000 or something. They had actually put the cents on the slide, which I'm not accustomed to seeing on presentations. Anyway, long and short of it is, it looks like Franklin County will receive about 153,000 of this one-time grant money, and we're being asked to contribute 1% of that. So, $1,500, something like that,
Yes.
for our share, along with the other 38 counties, 39 total in the state. And by doing that, we'd be a participant in this national effort and would be a beneficiary of their work in D.C. and elsewhere. So it certainly seems like a good thing for us to do, but that'll be a board decision.
Absolutely, and just to lend some more context, we'll get two payments. Franklin County would receive the first payment of $153,893.31 times two. The total that we receive is $307,786.62. So our total commitment would be $3,077. So in my eyes, and I believe in Commissioner Peck's eyes, it's a good return on investment for bringing some unallocated tax dollars back to the county. So, that's my take on it.
And what was the timeline on those two payments? I don't recall.
So let's see. I don't know, but I can definitely find out. I can definitely give Eric Johnson a call because I don't want to misstate anything out in the public on exact timelines.
Yeah.
But
I'll be seeing him tomorrow. I
okay,
can
if you
ask
wanna-
as well.
Sounds good. see, I can lend did want to throw out a couple more stats, which were really interesting, Commissioners. In terms of public lands in Washington State, so over 43%, or 19.8 million acres of lands in Washington State are publicly owned. Whitman County only has 5% of public land ownership. Skamania County has 86% that's public land ownership, so that's land essentially that's undevelopable in certain terms. Of the 19.8 million acres in public ownership, 12.7 million, or 64%, are owned by the federal government in Washington State. So that gives you some context on terms of numbers.
All right, so are we looking for an action on this? Because I don't see an RCW by it.
No, we're not at this point. Just wanted to bring it to the board for discussion, and we can certainly put that for future action, but just wanted to have a robust discussion, and I'll certainly be digging in a little bit more to find more facts on the timeline, as Commissioner Peck requested, and, you know, just really make sure that this is something that we want to do. But certainly on the surface, it seems pretty positive.
Yes, win-win. Mr. Davidson.
It does seem positive, but one question I think that the board ought to entertain is what jurisdiction would this, in my limited review, and had had just limited discussions with Mr. Gonzalez about this, the federal PILT of the Hanford PILT, we receive it, and it's very substantial to Benton County's budget. Does this group claim that they would take, because there's been a lobbying group associated with that for some time, is this going to take place of that?
No,
So that PILT is separate?
it doesn't displace that. This is, the 1% that we would contribute is one-time federal grant money that is not associated with existing PILT payments or other in lieu of. Some of the counties that have a large amount of federally and state encumbered lands are getting a very large check. And so their 1% contribution is going to be a lot more than ours, but they also stand to benefit a great deal more because there will be people in DC advocating on their behalf for the federal government to compensate the counties for those encumbered lands that they're not otherwise able to tax, but it doesn't displace PILT, no. There is a timeline on this, however. When I brought this up at last week's meeting, I asked that we have discussion on it and pointed out that I think we had 2 weeks before it was necessary for us to get back to WASAC with an indication. So I would...
I think there is a sense of urgency. I remember from that meeting, so
Yeah,
we do have to make a pretty quick decision.
There is. Given that the funds are coming from what you might call windfall grant monies, from outside the county, and given that our contribution is only about $3,000 actual dollars out of the $300,000 we're being given, and I think with that understanding, I would ask the board, in fact, I would move for the board to approve our participation in this effort and to contribute our 1%, along with the many other counties I've already heard are doing so.
So you've made a motion?
I did.
I will second the motion.
So the motion is for us, Franklin County, to join.
Is to participate with a number of other Washington counties and to contribute 1% of the grant funds that we've been offered. The understanding, of course, is that if those grant funds for some reason should not come through, the board's obligation, that's why I prefaced it by saying, given A, B, and C, I recommend we approve it.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. With no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, with that, we'll move down to, I believe, is that it for the administration office business anymore?
Yes, sir, that's it.
Okay, public comment. Is there anybody for public comment? Anybody on the phone?
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Victor Scott. I'm that babbling gentleman on the telephone. I I babble due to a disability that I received from a workplace injury is no fault of my own, but I still get up every day and I take care of my family and I try to get involved in my community. But George, I thank you for your service, for you standing up, I truly support your right to feel comfortable and safe to voice those views. And I really appreciate your watchdog mentality for standing up for your community, regardless of the politics. You stood up and served your country in a place where no man understands, and I thank you for that. I truly respect our veterans, and I truly respect our civil service. And George, I would also say I agree with you 98% of the time. Our county employees are amazing. It's the reason why I raised my family here, why I was a youth football coach here, is because I believed that our county was full of integrity 98% of the time. On the mental health issue, I have a brain injury, not a mental health issue, but they can be easily misconstrued. Have we asked the community? Have we asked contractors? Have we asked them to get involved and say, help us build this shelter? Look, we need this. Have we just reached out? Have we sat in the public and said, hey, put it on the news. Everybody get together. There's plenty of contractors, churches, and nonprofit groups come together to help build a community. We have a center that I heard off and on about that KGH center over there, but 72 hours, but even at best, it's at very best 6 months to 2 weeks for a qualified counselor. So we're giving somebody 3 days, and they know in that 3 days, they're told 3 days, 72 hours, ready, set, go, you're out on your own. We're forcing our communities all around us see that they slam the brakes on and they take care of this because those are the least among us. Those are those that can't, as you say, they end up going to jail. They end up in the jail system because they have no way to understand, no way to comprehend mentally the world around them. Maybe they're in crisis because of a family member. Maybe they're in crisis because of drugs. That's really bad. We have a fentanyl crisis like we can't even understand. 3 years ago, I used to feed the homeless in the park out here, and I used to watch them come over, and some of them would engage slowly, and other ones would sit down and spill it. And they're like, man, I'm on drugs, and I can't go home, and I want to tell my mom. And they'd eat some beans, and they'd be like, this is my mom's beans, and I just want to go home. I just want to go home. And I said, you can go home. They care about you. They love you. They're there for you. You made mistakes. Why can't we get involved? Get together with our community. I also want to say one last little thing. CJTC, the Criminal Justice Training Center. Real quick. I'll be very quick. 41, RCW 41.101.145. allows any individual to submit a written complaint to the WSCJTC stating that an officer's certification should be denied or revoked. And I would also like to finish my comment in 2 seconds. RCW 424130, the right to report improper government action. Whistleblowers Unite. Some cops, the letter R dumb cops, at gmail.com. But not all cops are dumb cops. Just some cops are dumb cops. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment?
Good morning. I didn't plan to say any more today except for the presentation by Mr. Olson. I have mentioned at a joint meeting with the two counties, and you talked about educators and their scramble to coordinate services. And I'd like to refer you again to the Envision Center model that was used up in Spokane. Workforce Investment Act agencies, and there are two that I know of, there may be more, but in this area it's Career Path Services, which is a nonprofit private contractor for Workforce Investment Act services, and there is also WorkSource itself that is signed by the state. Full disclosure, I worked for Workforce Career Path Services before they were forced into the same central area. What the Envision Center did was take money from the municipalities, create a building, and they removed the transportation issue for all these people that have mental illness and other needs, always other needs, housing, food, counseling, domestic violence. sundry things, and they would be given a full evaluation, which is what we did as Workforce Investment Act agents. And then they were taken by a navigator to each agency they needed. Now, the agencies didn't reside in that building. They had office space in it, and they manned it. That way, and you might need to involve your transportation with Benton Franklin Bus Services, but everyone had access to that building. They were evaluated whether they needed 72 hours of service or more, and this was a coordinating agency that Ben Carson envisioned. And it worked very, very well until the change of election, and I don't know if it's still in place, but they also coordinated with other services like churches, so there wasn't redundancy of services like Second Harvest Food and all the food services that the food banks that different churches has. It was all coordinated. Clothing was brought in. Many things were provided by the other NGOs, if you will, and churches in the agency. So I'd recommend to our commissioners to think about how inexpensive that is to have a body that's already in place with a few more assignments, so they're willing to do that evaluation to help this mental service be coordinated, and every single granted entity, whether it's governmental or NGO, is coordinated for the benefit of these people, and they only have to go one place, one center. The Envision Center is what Ben Carson did, and it was masterful. Thank you.
Anybody else for public comment? Anybody on the phone?
Nope, no one is on the phone, Commissioner.
And there are nobody else coming forward. So at this time, Mr. Gonzalez, we've got a couple executive sessions.
Yes, we do. We do have a need for an executive session under RCW 42.30.110, Section 1, subsection I, to discuss with legal counsel matters relating to agency enforcement actions, litigation, or potential litigation.
Time frame?
This one, I would give at least 30 minutes initially. We have multiple executive sessions, but this first one, I would say 30, and, hopefully it doesn't take that long, but.
Okay. All right, at
Mr.
this
Chairman,
time.
given the number of executive sessions scheduled today, it might be respectful if we were to indicate whether or not the board anticipates the need for any action following those executive sessions. I sometimes worry that our citizens will wait for an hour or more for all the executive sessions to conclude, and then come in only for us to adjourn the meeting. So are we anticipating any need for action following these?
At this point, I would say, because of some of the points you raised, it will likely be discussion, because
Not anticipating the board having to vote on anything?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to have to vote on anything.
Well, people are obviously free to wait, but I want to
Yeah.
at least give some indication of whether or not we're anticipating action.
I think that would be fair.
Yeah, okay,
So,
thank you.
You got it.
So at this time, we'll recess into executive session.
Thank you.
All three under the same find them all.
That they are all under the same RCW.
Otherwise, you have to come out and reenact.
Right, yeah, they're,
all the same.
from
Well, a half
what
hour
I
take-
understand, they're all from the
Figure
same.
out a total of all three and then just announce it once.
Will a half hour take care of all three?
I would think so.
Well, let's just go there if we can extend if we have to.
Right.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Do you-
We have come out of executive session. We're going to continue the same RCW for another 30 minutes, and we now recess into executive session.
I think so. We starting?
We ready?
Are we starting?
Hold on, go ahead and.
We had to go into standby mode. We are now going to recess into 30 minutes of the same RCW and executive session. At this time, we recess into executive session.
It's the one hidden window, it's not the last room.
We've come out of executive session. We're going into a 5-minute recess.
I guess I could have grabbed Mike's if you've got a copy.
Yeah, not a problem.
Had a great team.
Okay, we are back from our 5-minute recess, and we're going to go into the same RCW executive session for 30 more minutes. So at this time, we'll recess into executive session. We've come out of executive session and we're going to extend for another 15 minutes under the same RCW. At this point, we'll recess back into executive session.
A lot of municipal financing loans, yeah, Cashmere.
Ryan,
Bank.
would you open the door for us, please?
I say Cashmere, if you knew what that meant.
All right, we've come out of executive session and we're back to regular session. Is there any other business for the good of the county? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.
There were some people outside that were waiting for talk.